It'll be 1 to go this time by. Coming to the green, buddy, coming to the green. Let's go get him. Go, 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 go!
Get your motor running. Head out on the highway.
Stan Creekmore, Inside Track Motorsports News. Tony, 2 questions for you. Number 1, are you officially now an owner? It's in ink, etc. Number 2, making this step, do you already have a confidence that there is a sponsor in place for you for this deal?
We're currently working on it, but going back to your first question, yes, it is in ink, and it's dried even. So it's been dry for a couple weeks. The big thing, and just to explain to you guys why this process took as long as it did, is and what I said from day one, as far as telling you guys that we would tell you guys something as soon as we could talk about it. I wanted to, there were a lot of details that had to be taken care of in this, and I don't want anybody in the media to think that we were putting it off week after week. Yes, the decision had been made, yes, the contracts had been signed, but there was a part of it where we had to get a release from Joe Gibbs Racing and work through that. We had to work through the contracts with Joe and his group, but at the same time there were a lot of people and a lot of families that were involved in this, and being able to go talk to everybody at Joe Gibbs Racing before the release announcement went out and before today happened was something that was very important to us. So I hope all of you understand that it wasn't that we were trying to put you guys off week in and week out. It was a matter of there were a lot of details, and not only contracts that needed signed, but a lot of people that have a lot of sweat and tears and hours, and families have hours without their spouses being there. There were people involved that were important to talk to before this was announced. So all that is done and in place now, and it was a matter of trying to go to our organization, and I thought that I felt like that was the best thing to do, and to be fair to the team and everybody involved, was to talk to them before we made an announcement about this.
Dustin?
Dustin Long, Landmark Newspapers. A couple things. First, is this team still going to remain a 2-car team? Is there any for next year? Still be
Yes,
a 2-car team. Second of all, obviously you've got the champions provisional you can fall back on. How critical is it to get that 66 car in the top 35? And secondly, we hear some names on who might be in that second car. The current driver of the 66, Scott Riggs, is not one of those. What kind of a challenge, I guess, is that, or position is he in, trying to help you get into the top 35, where it seems like, you know, is that just the way business is done in the sport?
Scott hasn't been ruled out by any means. I think Scott's done a great job this year of stepping up to the plate in a lot of occasions. You know, it's a big list of drivers that we're working on. Obviously, it's important to get one of the 2 cars, or especially the 66 car, who's the closest right now, of getting them back inside the top 35 in points. You know, it's important, but at the same time, you know, I feel like you know, the level of this race team is going to go up next year, and hopefully that won't be a factor when it comes time to qualifying each week. And if we can get through the first 5 weeks, I think that part will take care of itself. But it's a valid concern at this point, obviously. But that's where, you know, Joe and everybody, that's like Joe said, I mean, there's people been calling already because of this announcement today, and hopefully they'll, you know, hopefully the added people that we'll be adding soon will be able to help ensure that we get the 66 car back in the top 35 in points, and it won't be an issue. But we obviously, you know, have 18 races left to accomplish that goal, and that's a very big variable in the equation right now of things to do before the end of the season.
Nate?
Nate Ryan, USA Today. Tony, you talked about the appeal of becoming another Richard Childress or Richard Petty, someone who's driven in the sport. You're a businessman now, but you started as a racer, and you're bucking a recent trend of a lot of, you know, private equity firms and deep-pocketed businessmen from outside the sport sort of buying into it. While a lot of guys that you mentioned, like Childress and Penske and Petty, are getting pretty late in their careers without obvious successors. Have you thought about, is it good for NASCAR to have somebody like yourself who is a racer, who's buying into team ownership and sort of maintaining a tie to the way things have always been, with the racers being the guys who are making the calls like that?
Well, I think you have to ask NASCAR that to understand it from their side. But I mean, I don't see where it's a negative. I don't know where having a driver that's won races and won championships in the series at the end of his driving career staying a part of the series as a car runner, I'm not sure where I see the negative in that. So I don't see NASCAR saying that. So I feel like it's a positive. I really don't see where there's a negative in that part of it. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of changes on the business side of it in the last couple of years, but I mean, I don't see where having somebody that's had a 10-year past in NASCAR changing roles necessarily in the sport is bad versus having people that have never been a part of it coming in and buying equity in teams that don't know anything about the sport. I don't see where this part of the equation's bad.
Tony, Brian Jodas, WAND-TV, down Decatur. Does this make you reevaluate any of your ownerships in your tracks and specifically Macon Speedway?
As far as?
Would you keep those tracks? I mean, are you still going to stay involved in all those?
Absolutely. None of the business ventures that I'm currently involved in are going to change because of this. We've got a pretty good staff. Obviously, the people that we have with all three of the racetracks and both sets of our race teams have been in place for a while, and those people are going to continue to be in place, and we're going to continue to work forward and do everything we can to make those teams and those racetracks as competitive as possible and as good of an experience as possible as far as the racetrack side. So none of that's going to change. This is just another big candle that we'll be burning each week.
Larry?
Yeah, Larry McReynolds, Fox and TNT. Joe, you mentioned, you and Tony both mentioned the partnership and the alliance that you have with Hendrick Motorsports. We know it's one of the closest alliances that there probably is in the garage area. Is this something that you had to get Rick to sign off on? Did he play a role in this? And then I guess the second part of the question, I know from a standpoint of what's been going on over there, knowing that you have that open book policy with Hendrick, it has to be, I think you've got one of the key players sitting beside you there, but it has to drive yourself crazy knowing that you've been as far behind as you've been with that kind of an open book policy over there with Hendrick Motorsports.
It's a challenge. You're absolutely right. First of all, we have a great relationship with Hendrick Motorsports, but there's boundaries and there's a lot to it, but it brings in Haas Automation's machine tool piece where they're marketing machine tools through the use of the manufacturing of the motors at Hendrick. So there's a lot of business stuff that goes on, but there's no ownership between the two companies. Rick Hendrick doesn't make our decisions. We don't we don't have any influence over his financial decisions. We're separate operating organizations. Although that being said, we are a customer and a technology partner on the chassis side of it. We purchase chassis from him. We get support from that. And it has been a frustration that our performance, isn't at the same level of Hendrick Motorsports over the years. But as Tony's mentioned, that's we feel that if you go down the checklist of okay, motors, chassis, facilities, wind tunnel time, 7-post rigs, all of the things that people use in our sport as excuses sometimes for the non-performance, we get to check most of those boxes. But the people thing is a constant challenge in our sport. And again, we feel that we've got good people, but drivers are absolutely critical. And with this new chassis that we're working with, the COT piece, it's even more. The driver is a huge factor, and that's really what drove this decision, is performance. We want to win, and we feel Tony Stewart wants to win as bad as we do. And we think we can learn a lot from him, and we're going to listen to him.
Dave?